Imagine standing on a battlefield where the fighting has just ended, but the real horror is only beginning. The dust settles, the screams fade, and in the distance, the army of Genghis Khan does not celebrate like other victors. There are no simple cheers, no mercy for the defeated. Instead, there is a system cold, calculated, and terrifying. Prisoners are lined up, not just soldiers, but families, children, entire communities. Wealth is sorted like objects, and human lives are treated no differently. Every victory becomes a ritual. Every ritual a message, resist us and this will be your fate. In some places, survivors are forced to march ahead of the army, becoming shields against their own people. In others, entire cities vanish. Not just destroyed, but erased from memory, their land left barren for generations. And yet to the Mongols, this was not chaos. This was order, a belief that their conquest was destined, that the sky itself had chosen them to rule the world. This is the dark truth behind the rise of the Mongol Empire, where victory was not the end of war, but the beginning of something far more terrifying. When people imagine victory in war, they often picture celebration. Cheers echoing across the battlefield, soldiers embracing, banners raised high, and the defeated either fleeing or surrendering. But in the campaigns led by Genghis Khan, victory did not look like that at all. It was not emotional, not chaotic, and certainly not spontaneous. Instead, it was controlled, measured, and governed by strict systems that transformed every triumph into an organized display of power. The absence of celebration was not a weakness or a lack of humanity. It was deliberate. For the Mongols, control after victory was just as important as winning the battle itself, and in many ways, it was the true objective. The moment a city fell, or an army collapsed, the Mongols did not descend into disorder. There was no uncontrolled looting, no random acts of violence carried out without direction. Everything that happened next followed a structure. Orders were given, roles were assigned, and every soldier knew exactly what was expected of him. This discipline was one of the defining features of the Mongol military system. While other armies throughout history often lost cohesion after victory, allowing soldiers to plunder freely or act on impulse, the Mongols did the opposite. They tightened control. The transition from battle to aftermath was seamless, almost mechanical, as if the victory itself had simply triggered the next phase of a larger, pre-planned process. One of the clearest examples of this controlled approach was the way spoils of war were handled. In many armies, the aftermath of victory meant chaos, with soldiers scrambling to grab whatever they could before others took it. This often led to infighting, disobedience, and a breakdown of command. The Mongols eliminated this entirely. Under their legal code, strict rules governed the distribution of loot. No one was allowed to take anything until it had been officially collected and sorted. The penalty for disobedience was severe and immediate. This created a system where even in the most chaotic environments, order was preserved. Wealth taken from conquered lands was not just a reward. It was part of a structured hierarchy that reinforced authority. This control extended beyond material goods to human lives. Survivors of conquest were not left to wander or rebuild on their own terms. They were processed, categorized, and assigned roles based on the needs of the empire. Some were taken as laborers, others as skilled workers, and many were absorbed into the Mongol system in ways that ensured they could no longer resist. This was not random cruelty. It was a calculated method of turning conquered populations into resources. The battlefield did not end when the fighting stopped. It evolved into a system of management where every person and every asset had a purpose. The absence of celebration also served a psychological function. By refusing to indulge in visible joy or triumph, the Mongols projected an image of inevitability. Victory was not something to be celebrated because, in their view, it was expected. This created a powerful message for both their own soldiers and their enemies. For the Mongols, it reinforced the idea that success was normal, that their dominance was unquestionable. For their enemies, it was far more unsettling. Facing an opponent who did not celebrate victory suggested that defeat was not just likely, it was certain. It removed any sense of hope that the enemy might be exhausted, distracted, or vulnerable after a battle. This approach also prevented one of the greatest dangers faced by any army: complacency. Celebration can weaken discipline. It can create moments where soldiers let their guard down, where commanders lose control, and where opportunities for resistance or counterattack emerge. The Mongols avoided this entirely. Their focus remained sharp even after a victory. They prepared for the next campaign, the next city, the next challenge. In this way, control was not just about maintaining order in the present, it was about ensuring future success. Another important aspect of this system was the way it reinforced loyalty within the Mongol ranks. By maintaining strict control over the aftermath of victory, leaders ensured that rewards were distributed fairly according to established rules. This reduced internal conflict and strengthened trust in the Ilkiata. Soldiers knew that their efforts would be recognized and that they would receive their share without needing to fight their own comrades for it. This created a level of unity that was rare in many armies of the time. Victory did not divide them. It brought them closer together under a shared system of order. Control also allowed the Mongols to use victory as a tool of communication. The actions they took after a battle were not just practical, they were symbolic. They sent messages to surrounding regions, to potential enemies, and even to their own people. By demonstrating that every conquest would be followed by a precise and unyielding system, they made it clear that resistance would not lead to chaos or negotiation, but to a predictable and overwhelming response. This predictability was itself a form of power. It removed uncertainty and replaced it with fear. It is important to understand that this system required an extraordinary level of discipline. Soldiers had to resist the natural human impulses that come with victory, the desire to celebrate, to relax, to act freely. Instead, they operated within a framework that demanded constant obedience. This discipline did not come from fear alone, although punishment for disobedience was certainly a factor. It was also rooted in training, culture, and belief. From a young age, Mongol warriors were conditioned to value order, hierarchy, and loyalty. These values did not disappear when the battle ended. They became even more important. The idea that victory was about control rather than celebration also reflects a broader philosophy of power. For the Mongols, power was not just the ability to defeat an enemy, it was the ability to shape what happened afterward. Anyone can win a battle under the right circumstances, but maintaining control over the aftermath requires planning, organization, and discipline. It requires turning a moment of triumph into a foundation for future dominance. This is what set the Mongols apart. They did not see victory as the end of a struggle, but as the beginning of a new phase in which their authority had to be firmly established. This approach also had long-term consequences. By maintaining control after each victory, the Mongols were able to expand their empire rapidly without losing cohesion. Each conquered region was integrated into a larger system, contributing to the strength of the whole. There were no gaps where rebellion could easily take root, no periods of weakness where enemies could regroup. The system was continuous, moving from one victory to the next with relentless efficiency. At the same time, this lack of celebration created a stark and unsettling image for those who witnessed it. It challenged the expectations people had about war and victory. Instead of seeing an army that rejoiced and then moved on, they saw one that remained cold, focused, and unchanging. This made the Mongols seem almost inhuman, as if they were driven by something beyond ordinary motivations. Whether or not this perception was accurate, it added to their reputation and made them even more formidable in the eyes of their enemies. In many ways, the Mongol approach forces us to rethink what victory means. It suggests that the true measure of success is not what happens in the heat of battle, but what happens afterward. It is about control, discipline, and the ability to turn a single moment into lasting power. While other armies might celebrate and lose momentum, the Mongols used victory as a stepping stone, a carefully managed transition that allowed them to continue their expansion without interruption. This system also highlights the importance of leadership. Maintaining such a high level of control required commanders who could enforce rules, coordinate actions, and maintain discipline under all circumstances. It required a clear chain of command and a shared understanding of expectations. Without strong leadership, the system would have collapsed into the same chaos that affected other armies. The fact that it did not is a testament to the effectiveness of Mongol Qaeda and the structures they put in place. Even in the harshest conditions, even after the most intense battles, this commitment to control never wavered. It became a defining characteristic of Mongol warfare, one that contributed significantly to their success. By removing celebration from the equation, they eliminated a source of weakness and replaced it with strength. They turned victory into a process rather than a moment, something that could be managed, repeated, and refined over time. The result was an empire that did not just grow through force, but through organization. Every victory added to a system that became stronger with each expansion. Control ensured that nothing was wasted, that every resource, whether material or human, was used effectively. It created a cycle where success led to more success, not through chance, but through design. In this sense, the Mongol approach to victory was both simple and profound. They understood that winning a battle was only part of the equation. The real challenge was what came next. By focusing on control rather than celebration, they ensured that every victory strengthened their position rather than weakening it. It is this perspective that helps explain how they were able to achieve such rapid and extensive conquests, transforming themselves into one of the most powerful forces in history under the Qiyadat of Genghis Khan. Psychological warfare was not just a tactic used by the Mongols, it was the foundation of their entire strategy. And under the Qiyadat of Genghis Khan, it became one of the most effective weapons in military history. While many armies relied primarily on physical strength, numbers, or battlefield skill, the Mongols understood something deeper about human nature. They knew that fear could travel faster than any horse, spread wider than any army, and weaken an enemy long before a single arrow was fired. Instead of simply defeating their opponents in combat, they aimed to break their will to resist altogether. This approach began even before a battle took place. News of Mongol actions was never contained. It was allowed, even encouraged, to spread. Survivors of conquered cities carried stories with them, stories that were often terrifying and unforgettable. These accounts were not always exaggerated. Many were based on real events that were shocking enough on their own. When these survivors reached other cities, they became living warnings. They described what happened to those who resisted and what might happen again. In this way, the Mongols turned every conquered population into a messenger, spreading fear across vast distances without needing to send a single official envoy. When the Mongols approached a new city, the defenders were often already afraid. They had heard the stories, imagined the consequences, and faced a difficult decision: resist and risk destruction, or surrender and hope for mercy. This was the core of Mongol psychological warfare. The goal was not always to fight. It was to make fighting unnecessary. If a city surrendered without resistance, the Mongols could conserve their strength, avoid losses, and move on more quickly. Fear became a tool that saved time and resources while expanding their control. The consistency of Mongol actions played a crucial role in this strategy. Their responses to resistance or surrender were not random. Cities that resisted were often treated harshly, while those that submitted could be spared or integrated into the empire with fewer consequences. This created a predictable pattern. People began to understand the rules, and that understanding influenced their decisions. Fear was not just about violence, it was about certainty. Knowing exactly what would happen if they resisted made the threat even more powerful. Another key element of this psychological approach was the use of scale. The Mongols did not rely on small, isolated acts to create fear. They operated on a level that was impossible to ignore. Entire regions were affected, and the impact was visible from miles away. The destruction of one city was not just a local event, it was a message to every other city in the region. The larger the action, the greater the psychological impact. It created a sense that resistance was not just dangerous, but futile. The Mongols also understood the importance of timing. Fear is most effective when it is immediate and unavoidable. By moving quickly and striking with precision, they prevented their enemies from organizing effective resistance. Cities did not have time to prepare or form alliances. The speed of the Mongol advance added to the psychological pressure. It created a sense of inevitability, as if the outcome had already been decided. This combination of speed and fear made it extremely difficult for opponents to respond effectively. Their use of deception further strengthened this strategy. The Mongols were known to manipulate perceptions on the battlefield, making their forces appear larger or more powerful than they actually were. This could involve tactics such as spreading out their quwwat to create the illusion of greater numbers or using signals to simulate reinforcements. These methods added another layer of psychological pressure. An enemy who believes they are outnumbered or outmatched is far more likely to lose confidence and make mistakes. Fear also affected leadership. Commanders who were aware of Mongol tactics faced enormous pressure. They had to decide whether to risk their people's lives by resisting or to surrender and face uncertainty. This pressure could lead to hesitation, poor decisions, or internal conflict. In some cases, leaders were divided, with some wanting to fight and others wanting to surrender. This division weakened their ability to respond effectively. The Mongols did not need to create these divisions directly. The fear they generated was enough to do it for them. The psychological impact extended to the battlefield itself. Soldiers who believed they were facing an unstoppable enemy were less likely to fight with confidence. Fear can disrupt coordination, reduce morale, and lead to panic. Even well-trained armies can collapse if their morale breaks. The Mongols exploited this by maintaining relentless pressure, giving their enemies little opportunity to recover or regroup. Each defeat reinforced the perception of Mongol invincibility, making future victories even easier. It is also important to recognize that this strategy required discipline and control. Psychological warfare is not effective if it is inconsistent or unpredictable. The Mongols had to maintain a clear pattern of behavior, ensuring that their actions aligned with the image they projected. This required strong leadership and a unified command structure. Soldiers had to follow orders precisely, understanding that their actions contributed to a larger strategy. Every act, every decision was part of a system designed to create and sustain fear. The belief system of the Mongols also played a role in their psychological warfare. Many believed that their success was not just a result of skill or strategy, but of destiny. This belief gave them confidence and a sense of purpose. It also influenced how they were perceived by others. An army that believes it is chosen or destined to win can appear unstoppable, especially to those who are already afraid. This added a spiritual dimension to their psychological impact, making their presence even more intimidating. In addition to fear, the Mongols used psychological incentives. They did not rely solely on threats. They also offered alternatives. Surrender could lead to survival, integration, or even opportunity. This created a contrast that made their threats more effective. People were not just afraid of what would happen if they resisted. They were also aware of what they might gain by submitting. This combination of fear and incentive made their strategy more flexible and effective. Over time, the reputation of the Mongols became one of their greatest assets. They did not need to demonstrate their ilkut in every situation because their history spoke for itself. Cities surrendered based on reputation alone, without requiring direct confrontation. This allowed the Mongols to expand rapidly, conserving resources and maintaining momentum. Psychological warfare reduced the need for constant fighting, turning fear into a force multiplier. This approach also had long-term effects. The memory of Mongol actions persisted long after their armies had moved on. Regions that had experienced or heard about their tactics remained cautious, often choosing submission over resistance even in later encounters. Fear, once established, did not disappear beshult. It became part of the collective memory, influencing decisions for years, or even generations. At its core, Mongol psychological warfare was about understanding and controlling perception. It was not enough to be powerful. They had to be seen as powerful in a way that discouraged opposition. By shaping how others thought and felt, they gained an advantage that went beyond physical ilkut. They turned the minds of their enemies into battlegrounds, winning conflicts before they even began. When the Mongols expanded under the Kierat of Genghis Khan, their destruction was not limited to defeating armies or occupying cities. It reached far deeper, targeting the very systems that allowed civilizations to survive and function. This meant that their campaigns often continued long after the fighting had stopped, affecting not just those who lived through the invasions, but generations that came after. The idea of destruction, in this context, went beyond immediate loss of life. and entered the realm of long-term collapse. One of the most significant aspects of this was the deliberate dismantling of infrastructure. Many regions the Mongols conquered relied heavily on complex systems such as irrigation networks, canals, and underground water channels. These were not simple constructions. They were the result of centuries of knowledge, labor, and adaptation to local environments. When these systems were damaged or destroyed, the consequences were not immediate alone. They unfolded slowly over time. Farmland that once supported large populations became dry and unusable. Crops failed, food supplies diminished,